Welcome to the Political Fallout Shelter, where we come to you each week from our windowless basement here below the Capitol. I am Leo Shane, Deputy Editor at Military Times. With me, as always, is Capitol Hill Bureau Chief Joe Gould. Joe, say hello to the people.
Howdy.
And with us this week for a change is one of the top aviation reporters in the country, Val Insinna. Val with Defense News, welcome. Welcome to the Political Fallout Shelter.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, Val, we've been following your stuff, as we always do. You've been traveling all over the world on a lot of different issues here. So we wanted to have you in this week while Congress is out to sort of talk about a broader look at a lot of the aviation things going on and some of the bigger stories. And one that I know you've been following is the F-35. I just found out that's actually a plane and not just a pejorative that people use when they're talking about boondoggles. So
yeah, I mean, you hear all the time people being like, "You're such an F-35,"
right,
like,
exactly.
"You mother F-35."
So look, I know, but the plane for the first time was used in combat recently, and this is a pretty spectacular milestone. So now everything's fixed, right? Everything's great and everything's wonderful with the program.
Yeah, I mean, not so much. It's definitely a historic milestone. The fact that the Israelis felt comfortable enough with the aircraft to use it in combat after, really just standing up their squadron late last year is, a good show that they feel like this thing really can do the job. But at the same time, Israel always flies its aircraft into combat way sooner than the U.S. does. So I don't really think that you can necessarily say that, the United States is going to start using its F-35s in the Middle East, to fight terrorists. I don't think that's going to be the case, and you can definitely not say the problems are over.
So where are we right now? Because I think most of our folks who are watching this or listening to this sort of know the F-35 in abstract as this very expensive plane that Congress is always complaining about, that always seems to be the butt of some joke. What's the situation in the military right now? Is it ready? Is it on good footing? Where are we?
Well, I mean, it's like an easy question with a really complicated answer. Because, I mean, do you though? There's so much tied up in this aircraft. When you talk to the pilots love it. They love flying it. They really see a lot of benefits that come with it being very stealthy, with the sensor fusion, which means that it, can take all of its cameras and radars and mush them all together to provide this picture where you have much more accuracy to see where adversaries are. They love that. But, they're still expensive planes. Sustainment is still an issue. Making sure spare parts are available across the enterprise is still an issue. There's a logistics system that's meant to help with mission planning and ordering spare parts and, helping the maintainers walk through all of their maintenance. And, that's still having a lot of problems as well. So, it's doing better with caveats, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say to your point about sustainment, I think what we saw with the new Senate Armed Services Committee approved defense policy bill, I mean, they kind of tapped the Pentagon on the shoulder about the sustainment issues by slicing two planes from the plan buy. There were going to be 77, and they're saying we'd like you to buy two fewer of the F-35, and we want to move that money into just the area that you're saying has problems, spares, sustainment. I mean, do you think that's going to, but I'd ask you, do you think that's going to have an impact? What is it? And also, we know that the House bill does not do that. The House bill fully funds the president's request. I mean, does two really make a dent? Is it going to send a message, do you think?
Well, I mean, two planes, at this point, one F-35A costs around $95 million. So it's a significant amount of money there, taking, two away. And I was actually really surprised looking at the Senate version of the bill, the fact that they actually, had the cojones, I guess, to take F-35s away. That's something that they've not done in the past.
Right. They're usually fully funding purchases from the president's budget request,
or adding jets. So I think sustainment is definitely something that we're starting to see lawmakers take a lot more seriously. So 2 weeks ago, I went to Marine Corps Air Station
Mm-hmm.
Beaufort in South Carolina, and talked to the pilots, some maintainers that are all doing training up there. They do the Marine Corps training for every pilot that's going to be flying the B model, and the pilots, of course, they love the plane. They think it's awesome. They're fully bought into it. You talk to the maintainers, and they're like, "Yeah, this is awesome. There are still some kinks to be worked out." One guy told me that you'll put in an order for a spare part into the computer, into the logistics system, and it will sometimes spit out, a year or two
Huh.
of turnaround time. Now that isn't actually like how long they have to wait. They, can I guess make some calls and try to get the parts faster. So usually they'll end up getting parts in a matter of days, or more of a worst case
Well,
scenario, a
that's
month. But
well, that's not the only hiccup for the F-35 program that's made news in the last couple of weeks. We've and particularly up here, we had several lawmakers, senators, Tom Tillis from North Carolina, Gene Shaheen from New Hampshire, James Lankford from Oklahoma. They got together. They have an amendment to the defense policy bill that would affect potentially Turkey's purchase of the F-35. And as F-35 watchers know, the whole enterprise relies on international partnerships to drive the costs down. So, what do can you talk a little bit about what this proposed amendment would do, and also what impact it might have on the program?
so I think it's really hard to say at this point. And I think that's something that the U.S. government is kind of scurrying to figure out what sort of impact it could have, or what they themselves should be doing about this issue. It's kind of a mess that no one has an easy answer for, because Turkey is not only buying 100 F-35s, but they also help make the planes as well, because they paid into the development, so they get a certain amount of industrial participation and bring jobs back to Turkey. So it's really like a complicated problem, and I don't think there's an easy answer for it yet.
I think that just to give a little bit of background on this, I think that the Turkey is a NATO ally of the United States. We rely on Turkey for the use of an air base in Turkey for for military action in the Middle East, but there's increasing anxiety about the Turkish government's repression. There's a missile defense system sale that's due to go through, where Turkey's going to buy a Russian system, the S-400, and I think the defense policy bill also addresses that by expressing a sense of Congress that that's a problem. So I mean, how do we do you think that's likely to how do you think that's likely to play out, or we still don't know yet?
I don't think we know yet. So next month, or June, I don't know if that's this month or next month, depending on when this actually goes out. Sorry, guys. But sometime in June, the first Turkish F-35 is going to be delivered to Turkey. From what I hear, it seems like that is still going to happen, even as this conversation plays out. But what you got to remember is that when Turkey gets its F-35s, or starts getting F-35s, it's not going to just take them and be like, okay, we're going to bring these back to Turkey now.
Mm-hmm.
They actually go to Luke Air Force Base in the U.S., and they start standing up their squadron, and their maintainers learn how to maintain the thing, and their pilots learn to fly the thing alongside U.S. pilots. So there's still going to be a period of about 1 to 2 years where the U.S. can take some action, perhaps.
Hmm.
So I think this is something that is going to play out long term. But maybe I expect that we'll start hearing more about this once the delivery happens, and as Congress starts to maybe put some more pressure on the situation.
Well, look, this isn't the only conflict point we've seen with aviation in these defense policy bills recently. We saw some issues in there about, yeah, as you said, some of the maintenance and some of the maintaining, some of the safety issues. And then I know there was a JSTARS issue that came up just in the past few weeks that can you give us the background on that and explain what JSTARS is to those of us who have no idea what we're saying.
Okay, so JSTARS is a modified Boeing 707. They take this commercial plane and they put a big ground tracking radar on it so that it can look at targets on the ground and feed that information to other aircraft. The Air Force initially was going to basically buy new modified business jets to do the exact same mission. But then it started thinking, maybe this isn't the most survivable way to do the mission. Maybe Russia and China can easily shoot those planes down on, day one of a war. So is there a better way to do this? So they want to cancel their replacement program for JSTARS, which is called JSTARS Recap. And I expect there's going to be some pretty big fighting on the Hill about this, just because HASC really wants to force the Air Force actually to keep going with the JSTARS Recap program, and the Senate seems to be a lot more amenable to the Air Force's alternate plan here.
Well, it's interesting because we've seen in recent years with this defense bill at large, a lot of when the money was tighter, a lot of let's not cancel programs, let's keep building things up, as you guys said before, let's keep adding things. Now that we've hit a mark that people feel comfortable with, we're starting to see some more of this tweaking and some more of this move around of, okay, well, maybe we need this, but do we really need this? Whereas 2 years ago, I can't imagine them even talking about canceling a program.
Well,
like this.
the thought here is that, so there are a couple of dynamics. I mean, the replacement is the ABMS, right?
Advanced Battle Management System.
Right. So it's the sort of the next generation is going to be a group of sensors presenting a fused surveillance picture. That's the concept anyway. But it seems from the Hill perspective that there's a mix of kind of parochial interests here because it's the Georgia delegation and JSTARS is based in Georgia. They've been resistant to abandoning JSTARS entirely. But it's not simply a parochial issue because the case that they're making is, okay, if you're going to abandon this, what are we going to have in the interim? We don't want to have some kind of capability gap. It takes a long time for programs to develop. And so, and also the Air Force has kind of changed its mind a few times. So we sense that Congress wants to assert itself here to make sure that there isn't that gap or.
Absolutely. And I think that the Air Force has done a pretty poor job messaging this, frankly. I think a lot of people on the Hill don't really understand this ABMS plan. I mean, I don't, and I cover the thing. The idea is, you increase the capabilities of your existing aircraft and drones, make them better able to communicate with each other, more easily share information, give them new radars and stuff. But it's what exactly, what does that mean? And the Air Force, one thing they keep saying is, our old JSTARS, they can keep doing the mission until 2030, so there's not going to be a gap. But the JSTARS, the legacy JSTARS, have been having a bunch of problems. They haven't been getting in and out of the repair depots as quickly as they should. So I think the Air Force is maybe making this a little bit too simple and not really addressing some of the issues that Congress have that are actually legitimate issues.
Yeah. Well, so to Leo's point, I mean, this is we reported this week that there are several different programs where there's a potential fight between the House and Senate over the House and Senate negotiators over differences in the defense policy bills when it comes to aviation. The next one on the list is the KC-46, the tanker aircraft, and I think it's again it's a difference of maybe one aircraft.
Yeah, one plane.
Yeah, but again it's to sort of tap the Air Force on the shoulder and say something to them. Talk to us about the KC-46. It's got some problems, and the Senate seems to be saying, get it together.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely sends a message. Last year was kind of interesting because, the same problems were still going on with the KC-46, but Congress added 3 planes,
Hmm.
which was really, really like a strange choice for me. So it
Yeah.
seems now maybe they're taking their oversight role a little bit more seriously. There are a lot of issues going on with this program. Basically, Boeing is under a fixed price contract, which means that the government has agreed to give them a certain amount of money to develop this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if they go over, they have to pay for it themselves. So it's a really good deal for the taxpayer. We haven't had to shell out, our money to help pay for the problems on this thing. But the company was supposed to deliver 17 aircraft last year to the Air Force. And they still haven't done it.
Right. And
Um,
and they got dinged to the tune of like $3 billion, right? They had to pay a
yeah.
fine to the government for about $3 billion. You wrote about there's a significant issue with the aircraft having to do with the boom. So like if you've ever seen a picture of these things, there's one plane, there's a boom, it goes into the other plane, to refuel it. But there's some kind of problem with the sensor system, so that the boom doesn't exactly that they can't get the boom to line up. That seems like a pretty significant issue.
Yeah, it's something that Boeing says that they can fix by updating their software so that when the boom operator is actually maneuvering this rigid hose into an aircraft's receptacle, that they'll be able to see it more clearly and better be able to direct it without potentially scraping the aircraft.
That
Um,
sounds bad.
yeah, it sounds bad,
Yeah.
especially when you've got F-22s or B-2s or F-35s that have a very expensive radar absorbing coating on it. Yeah, you don't want to ding that.
Yeah, and if it's a tanker aircraft, I mean, it's got to do its job.
Yeah,
Get
so-
the
Yep.
fuel from one aircraft to the other. I mean, I learned in your reporting that in other tanker aircraft, there's like a little guy, right? Or there's a little space for a guy. I don't know if the guy is little to fit in the space, but there's a little space where a guy goes into like a pod and directs the thing by hand. But the difference is that this has like a giant SUV with like a rear view camera. This has a set of
really like
cameras,
that.
but the camera doesn't work to get the boom in. So anyway,
I mean, the camera works. I don't want to like
okay.
throw it completely under the bus, but there are certain I guess lighting conditions if the sun is
Oh,
setting and
right.
you're turned a certain way where
You
the
can't see.
shadows just kind of play around and you cannot see as good as you should be able to. So Boeing's gotta fix that, or else the Air Force probably isn't going to accept those tankers. And Boeing is adamant that they're going to be able to deliver, the 17 that they're supposed to by the end of the year. But the Air Force doesn't actually believe that's going to happen, which is really
Troubling.
troubling or hilarious. That's where we're at right now.
Val, let me throw one curveball at you. We had Tara Kopp, our Pentagon reporter, here a couple weeks ago talking about all the aviation mishaps and the problems going on. You said you've just been out talking to some of the pilots, talking to some of the logistics folks. What's the attitude right now? Is there concern? Is there a morale issue? I know there's a lot of issues with recruiting and retention. There's a lot of issues with the older aircraft. I mean, what's the sense you got from folks on just the state of military aviation?
Huh, that's an interesting question, and maybe not one that I've maybe posed to airmen or pilots, maintainers as much as I should have either, because I'm a tech nerd. But the sense that I get is that these are all concerns that
Hmm.
you know deserve to be raised, but I haven't heard from anyone explicitly that they're afraid to go into
Right.
work. But then again, when I talk to them at these bases, there's usually a public affairs officer standing behind me. So, are they going to be like, "Oh yeah, let's talk about maintenance, Valerie. Also, I feel really unsafe with my job," you know?
But you have looked at maybe not the mishaps in the same way, but you have looked at sort of like physiological episodes and I mean, but that's a pretty big mystery. Like what's happening? Why is it happening?
Yeah, nobody knows. There's the Navy, the Air Force are both doing a bunch of studies. They're trying to figure out better ways so that pilots can measure how they're doing up in the air, make sure that they're not losing oxygen in their blood, things like that.
Take a step back. I mean, pilots are losing consciousness in flight. Like, that's scary.
I mean, I don't think it's gotten necessarily to losing consciousness, but they're feeling faint, they're feeling lightheaded. They're not getting enough oxygen to their blood, or they're getting too much carbon dioxide or not enough. And all of this creates a sensation that you're going to pass out. And then when you pass out, you're probably not going to make it. That's a huge problem. But it's really hard to determine what is causing this, because the same symptoms can kind of correspond with different causes. There could be pollution, air pollution, as oxygen is being filtered through the system. There could be too little oxygen, going into someone's bloodstream, and that could happen because of technical reasons, and it could happen just because maybe they're feeling uneasy, and it's a psychological thing, perhaps.
Well, there's a physical, I mean, maybe folks don't think about it, but there's a physical strain that happens to pilots while they're piloting these, these aircraft that are like really pushing the boundaries of physics, and that's, but what we've seen is in the House Armed Services version of the NDAA, they've included a commission that would study mishaps, but also physiological episodes. We haven't seen corresponding language in the Senate bill, but I don't think there's any reason to believe that there's going to be pushback on the Senate side. I think that's, I mean, this is just me speculating here, but I feel like that's a provision from the House bill that's likely to last through the through the final bill.
I totally agree. I think what I would maybe keep an eye on is, I think the House threw in some extra money for technologies that maybe could help figure out what's going on, do some diagnostic sort of stuff. And I would be interested to see whether that sticks, because, money is hard to there are a lot
It's
of
got to come from somewhere.
Yes,
If you're paying for something in one place, it's taking money away, and somebody may want that money for something else.
Absolutely,
Possible.
yeah.
Well, look, finally here, since we've got you here, since we're talking about aviation, since you've got, since you're a professed tech geek here with this stuff, what's the coolest military flight you've been on? What have you been able to see and actually get into?
So I probably have done fewer flights than you would think.
You're missing opportunities.
I know. Hey, call me up. I would love to fly in all of your aircraft. But maybe the coolest thing I've ever flown in, and this is not like a promotion for this particular aircraft, but Lockheed's version of the TX, which is a trainer jet, but it's actually more of like a light fighter, got to fly in that. So did a bunch of my colleagues at, Aviation Week or Defense One. A bunch of us got to go out and fly in this thing and kind of put it through its paces. And because it is sort of like a light fighter, you get to feel all of those bodily sensations, doing like barrel rolls and high G turns, and it definitely tires you out. But we kind of had a competition about
how many G's did you pull?
So I did 7.6. So
What?
I almost won, but Laura Seligman from Aviation Week went after me.
We don't talk about the competition here.
Yeah. Joe, how about you? What's the?
It's not so much cool, but just I feel a little sentimental about it. When I was at Army Times some years back, I went to Haiti maybe about a month after the earthquake in 2010, and the country was just absolutely devastated. I got to meet a number of troops doing different things, but like one kind of obscure corner of the military was there were a group of attorneys, military attorneys, and they were helping expedite adoptions for Haitian orphans. And I was actually me and photographer Chris Mataloni were standing on the tarmac, waiting to take our flight out, and somebody handed Chris Mataloni a 10-month-old child, and we got some very sweet pictures of that, and I wrote rode a cargo aircraft back to the United States with a group of children who were going to be adopted in the United States.
Oh,
Wow.
nice.
Way to make me look horrible, dude.
Well, look, I'll save it for you. From the sublime to the absurd here. Before I got into a lot of military reporting, I got to cover an air show with the Golden Knights, and as part of that, they took us up with the Golden Knights to see them, flop out of a plane there. And as we're circling up,
Technical term there.
well, as we're circling up, they take the doors off, and you see the reporters go, sheet white as we see the ground circling us. And there's always that one crew member who keeps sticking his head out and saying, "Oh, we're at 8,000 feet up, we're at 9,000 feet," and just showing off. And as we're on this particular flight, as we're banking around, he sticks his head out and he starts to make a comment, and the plane banks, and he takes 2 steps backwards and just catches hold of the thing and says, "Well, that would have been really bad," and pulls himself back to the plane and walks away. And we're like, these people are insane. This is what it takes to jump out of a plane. It's just total insanity. So didn't see any fatalities. That was nice. But look, Val,
that would have been a different story.
It would have been a different story. So, Val, thank you so much for coming this week and chatting with us. You can follow all of Val's stuff all week long at defensenews.com and at militarytimes.com. And you can follow her on Twitter. Your Twitter handle is?
At Valerie Insinna.
Joe, your Twitter handle is?
At Reporter Joe.
And I am at Leo Shane. Please follow all of us. Tune in again next week. Thanks for listening.